What's going on, everybody? You are listening to the Sports On broadcast. I'm Tyler Edgerton. My co host is Joe Fabiani. This is episode 48. Joe, what's going on, man?
What's going on, brother? It's been a long time.
It's the final Wednesday of the offseason. We got the Eagles coming up. They're probably traveling to Lambeau right now as we speak, and we got football tomorrow.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. It's the best time of the summer.
Well, there's a lot of things going on and a lot of storylines coming out of Eagles camp. Why don't we start with our personal favorite or what we think is the biggest storyline? I'll let you go first.
Uh, Carson Wentz. It's pretty easy. Um, just his progression and I think all the stories that are coming out about how good he looks and his presence in the locker room and how he's matured. They're really good things to hear. And I know that there's been some stuff, at least on the radio shows, that people are saying, it's been kind of boring. They're not used to this boring atmosphere, but I think it's actually a good thing that there's no, kind of scandal or big story. It's just this kid's progressing, and that's just the way it's going to go. And I like what we're hearing, in terms of how he's developed into such a good leader. The rest of the team will
I
fall
hear
into
you.
place. But I think we agree that it's all about the quarterback progressing.
Yeah, I agree as well. You look at the team that's most boring in the league, that would be the New England Patriots. And how many rings have they won that way? I mean, I'm
Yep.
totally fine with it kind of being under wraps and everyone just progressing, like you said. I would guess my top storyline is kind of how Doug Peterson is going to progress in year two. There's no more gimmies anymore. He's just got to step up and have the right play calls ready to go. But we definitely have some other ones to talk about. One that's kind of been tossed around a lot on social media and through the radio as well would be the battle between Nelson Aguilar and Jordan Matthews for that slot position. Um, do you want to share your thoughts on that just to start and who you think should take that?
I would say that I think, not that obviously we've seen reports that Nelson's having a good camp, and that's something that you want to see. We kind of expected him to kind of make a bit of a jump last season. I know traditionally it usually takes about 3 years for wide receivers to really catch on in the NFL, traditionally anyway. I know we were spoiled with a few years there where we had some rookie wide receivers have great seasons. But I would think that at this point it's probably more competitive just because Jordan Matthews is a bit slowed from injury. I don't really buy that he's falling out of favor. I think that they're just going to try to take advantage of Aguilar's speed, and if he's able to, hold on to the ball, I think that's it's going to be huge for them. But I would say that it's definitely one of those battles that you're intrigued by, and we hope to see a bit of that tomorrow. I don't know. I'm sure Nelson and Jordan Matthews will be out there longer than one series, I would think. But we'll see what happens.
I think as of right now, they're planning on having Matthews as their slot receiver as the starter. We'll see. There are some rumors going around that they may trade him for a cornerback, but in my personal opinion, you shouldn't be plucking another cornerback off someone's team right now. You should have done it in fantasy, or I'm sorry, in free agency or during the draft. But they did pick up two. They're gonna have to progress. We'll jump into the rookies a little later. But sticking with this, Nelson Aguilar, when I went down on Sunday to see the open practice, I really thought Aguilar had a pretty solid mirroring of what we're hearing through the reports, and that would be that he's got more confidence. He's making the catches that he needs to make. He's running the right routes. But still, I need to see it in a game personally. Jordan Matthews, he's been nothing but consistent the first 2 years or the first 3 years he's been in the league. Actually, Ruben Frank pointed out that he is one of seven players in their first 3 seasons to accomplish 225 catches, 2,500 plus yards, and 19 touchdowns. The other six are Randy Moss, Larry Fitzgerald, AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, OBJ, and Mike Evans. He's not on their level, but he was the most consistent target for Carson Wentz. And I think that chemistry that they have is going to be huge, especially if the Eagles want to make the playoffs this season.
Yeah, you said the word. He's consistent. We've seen him steadily grow, and I think he kind of is what he is right now. I think he's a guy that can get you, anywhere from 700 to 900 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns, which that's great to have on your team. Um, but I think that we obviously know that him and Wentz already have that chemistry, and he feels comfortable with him. So and he's actually at this point he's a veteran, and he's a good teammate. He's a nice voice in the locker room. He's somebody you want to have on your team. But I think that at this point where they are with their depth at the wide receiver position, if they were able to get a decent value for him from another team with the corner, they definitely have to look at that. They're very poor when it comes to their corners. So I think that at this point, if they were able to line something up, I know there's been a lot of reports with Kyle Fuller falling out of favor in Chicago. I think that if that was actually a possibility, that would be a good switch. But I think that going into this season, it's going to be good to have that many weapons, especially a guy that already has the chemistry down with Carson. So I think that would be huge for them, if they were able to hold on to him. But like I said, I think that he's just, it's really more of him, coming back from an injury rather than like, a competition for who's really going to get that number 3 spot. I think they're going to be spread out a lot. I think we're going to see a lot of different formations than we saw last year, just because of all the weapons that they have.
Yep.
So I think that the ball's going to be spread around a lot more, and he helps you in that department. But if you could get a corner for him, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Last thing before we move on to another topic in Eagles training, just with Nelson Agholor, I personally feel like you should hang on to Jordan Matthews, have him be the starter, but mix in Agholor, a 50-50 split even, and see if he can handle the NFL stage. I mean, he struggled in the first 2 years. He had mental games last season. If he comes in and he looks like he's on fire, he starts the season like he did against the Browns last season and carries that game to game, then you realize, unfortunately, you're not getting anything for Jordan Matthews at the end of the season, but at least Agholor is ready to step up and take that slot receiver position.
Right. I feel like at this point you can kind of say that he's not going to be back here next year. I saw a report yesterday that on the open market he's going to be worth somewhere around 5 years for $50 million. Like, the Eagles aren't going to pay him that kind of money.
No, they can't.
Yeah, they weren't even willing to pay DeSean Jackson that kind of money. So, I'm sorry, Jeremy Maclin that kind of money. So, for a number 3 receiver, I think we hold on to players like Jordan Matthews in this town. I think that we fall in love with guys who are hard workers and, show consistency. But at this point, I think he's shown that he's really not a true number 1, or not even really a number 2. He's really just a slot guy. And, I think that he'd be a very productive player in a system that would cater to that type of player. But, right now, with the other options you have, he's the 3rd guy. And, if Nelson takes that next step, I think they're going to be comfortable enough to move on from Matthews and use Nelson in the slot next year.
Want to let you guys know you can go on Twitter right now and vote on the top storyline of Eagles camp so far. Right now, the poll says that 59% would be the lack of starting corners. Your 4 options are Matthews, Agholor battle, which we just touched on, the corners, Wentz's development, and the coaching staff. You can hit us up at Sporting Edge 1. You can also comment on our Facebook feed, and we'll try and keep track of that. Let's move into another headline, and it would be 2 of the newcomers. Obviously, Torrey Smith has looked very good in camp. He's stretching the field, and that's what we need him to do. But there's 2 on my mind that I can't really get rid of, and I'm a little bit worried about. Let's see if you have the same feeling. Number 1 would be Alshon Jeffrey. I don't feel as bad about him. Obviously, he got injured. He had a shoulder injury that kept him out of practice a couple days. He was limited Sunday when I went down to the link and they had their open practice. I'm not as you want him ready for week 1, so I'm not really concerned if he even plays tomorrow. I don't have an issue with that at all. But another one that's kind of worrisome to me would be LeGarrette Blount. He missed time for personal reasons. I haven't seen a report on what that was, and I hope it's, nothing serious about his family or anything like that. But I just kind of feel like he has a don't care attitude. When people ask him what his role is going to be in the offense, he's like, oh, yeah, we'll see. Not really worried about it. And I feel like he isn't trying as hard as he should be in camp.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really feel comfortable in speculating on what was exactly going on. But I do hear, I do, that's definitely a good concern because I feel like that was something that people didn't really think about before they signed him. People
We
forget
talking
that
about practice, man.
yeah, people forget that he basically worked his way out of Pittsburgh when he was up there, and ended up back in New England. But I would say that you know I think we forget because we've been such a young team over the last few years that when it comes to camps like this, veterans really do need more time to really ease back into it.
Hmm.
And obviously, Blunt's an older player. Jeffrey, he's I think he's 27, but those are the guys you're going to need to be your workhorses during the season. And I wouldn't really look too much into Jeffrey being you know sitting out and kind of just taking it easy on the sidelines. But Blunt, I would say that I'm not really worried about it just because today, when you look at the depth chart, he's listed as number one running back. So I think that tells you something right there. I think if there was an issue, he would be the guy who's not listed as their starter.
I agree with that, but I also think it's going to be more of a running back by committee this year. I think they're going to mix in the younger guys, even Pumphrey. He's going to get some touches. I wouldn't be surprised. Like the way I look at it before when we first signed Blunt, I was like, okay, Blunt's going to get 15 touches, Sproles will get 6 to 8, and Smallwood and Pumphrey may get 3 or 4 each max. But now that I think about it, I feel like Blunt is only going to get 10 carries, and Sproles will see a little bit more. Pumphrey's going to get a little more. So is Smallwood. What do you think about just the running back by committee theory?
I think there's going to be a decent amount of that. I would think that Blunt is going to be anywhere from the 12 to 15 range, but it also depends on the game, the type of defense they're playing. I
Yeah,
think
very
that they're
true.
going to, yeah, I think they're going to look to use Sproles and Pumphrey more in those slot roles or go double backs in the backfield, and kind of do some things from there. We've heard a lot of reports that they really like using Pumphrey in the slot. Um, and there was a couple of different rumors with them doing different plays with both Sproles and Pumphrey on the field. But also, there's been good reports on Wendell Smallwood coming out of camp as well. So that's something that's I think they're at the point where they have a good problem. I really do only think that Blunt's probably going to be here a year, maybe two, if that. I think that they're going to look to build on that spot. But I also wouldn't sleep on Wendell Smallwood. Kind of, if something, I know Blunt's an older player, so if something was to happen to him, and I know they really like Smallwood, and I wouldn't be surprised to really see him take on a bigger role if he's given the opportunity. Um, but I think that you're right, and it's definitely going to be a committee. We know that it's not going to be a running team. They're going to run more, obviously, because they don't want to put the stress on Carson. But um, it's kind of tough to say. It's almost like that the Patriots backfield. You really never know who's gonna get the workload every week.
Yeah, and I like the way you put that. It's going to be situational football, depending on their touches, where they're at on the field, what the game situation is. That's very true. Yeah, I would have them around 10 to 12 touches, not necessarily 12 to 15, but we'll see. I mean, the one thing I do like is that they are throwing Sproles and Pumphrey into certain packages, and I forget who it was. Maybe Jeff McLean said at one practice they actually had both of them go out on routes, and there was only one linebacker to cover them. It's like, pick your poison and what are they going to run. So I
Right.
think we're going to see a little bit more tricky plays. Another thing I saw from Doug Peterson yesterday was that he wants to continue to be aggressive.
Mhm.
Now, hopefully, he's not going for 4th and 8 when he doesn't have to and challenging 2-yard plays. But I think, seriously, I think that's going to be another storyline that we need to look at is his development. There's no more excuses for Doug
Right.
Peterson. And on top of that, Jim Schwartz, hopefully he's not the scapegoat because the defense lets him down, but he's going to have to figure something out with these awful cornerbacks we have going on.
Right. You got. I feel like you're going to have to expect a lot of inconsistency when it comes to the cornerback position this year. Uh, just because you're relying so heavily on younger corners, and we know that it takes a while for corners to develop. Even top touted prospects take a little bit to develop, and I really think we're going to see what Jalen Mills is made out of. I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on him this year to really see what he's capable of doing.
I want winners.
And obviously we know Robinson's been getting burnt all camp. So I actually don't expect him to make the team, especially with the emergence of what seems to be C.J. Smith the last few days. So I would expect that if he gets burnt tomorrow night a few times and plays very poorly, I would think that he would definitely be in the doghouse, and they would just go with a youth movement at the corner spot. That way they can grow as a group rather than have a veteran who really has no presence.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I actually wrote couple days ago, maybe even a week ago. You can check it out on our site, mysportingedge.com. I wrote an article saying that C.J. Smith could be that starter. Patrick Robinson has looked awful in camp. Jalen Mills is going to have to cover the number ones once again this season. Hopefully he's up to the task. He did make a great play in the open practice on Torrey Smith. It was an underthrown ball by Wentz, but he really went up there and just attacked the ball in the air. But as far as the corners go, yeah, Patrick Robinson is. I think they'd only be on the hook for $700,000 if they were to cut him, and he struggled the last couple years with injuries. So I mean,
yeah,
cutting him, maybe Rasul Douglas. My whole thing was, I think Robinson will stick around just because he is a veteran, and then they'll probably work in Douglas or C.J. Smith as the season goes on.
right.
But the way he's looked, man, honestly, he could be cut, and I wouldn't care at all.
Yeah, I think we forget that Ron Brooks is also in that room. So he projects to be the corner or the nickel corner. And we can't discredit the safeties that we have, who are going to be able to help out. And they made they made an investment last year in Rodney McLeod, and hopefully we don't see any of that not going for the tackle in the red zone like last season. But I think that they're in a very good spot at the safeties position, and I think that that's actually going to be able to help them out in certain games. But obviously we know that this team is going to give up a lot of big passing plays. And it's really one of those things where we kind of have to expect it at this point. So I mean, if you can see growth from Mills and growth from Rasul Douglas, I think you're going to take that. I don't expect Sidney Jones to play at all this year. I know there's some people who are still holding out hope you're going to see him this year. I would think you're definitely not going to see him. But like you said, I just don't. The reports that are coming out about Robinson, I just don't see how there's any way that he's going to be on this roster come opening day.
I mean, you think about the corners we've had the last couple of seasons: Bradley, Fletcher, Gary Williams, Byron Maxwell. Patrick Robinson is worse than all three of those. So,
Right.
I mean, it's going to be tough for him to hang on in camp unless he turns around immediately. And he's even said himself, I mean, you do credit him. He said, yeah, I've sucked, and I need to step it up. Unfortunately, he's just not doing that. And I kind of wonder about...
He's just not that good.
Yeah.
What it really comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, he was a first-round pick. He's bounced around the league with 3 teams already. This is his 4th. We'll see where it goes. But, I mean, as far as the rookies go, you talked about Rasul Douglas, and he's been struggling just because cornerback is tough to pick up in your first year. We saw it with Jalen Mills. He was inconsistent last year, although he did have
Eric Rowe too, who we never should have traded.
Yeah, talk about that. I mean, they were both inconsistent in their rookie seasons, but you got to give cornerbacks a little bit of slack. They're going up against the easiest. You look at cornerback, it's the hardest to pick up. You look at wide receiver for a rookie, it's probably the easiest thing. You're told the route to run, you got to pick up the playbook, you go out and catch the ball. But as far as a corner, it's a lot tougher. And as far as other rookie development, I've heard Derek Barnett is struggling a little bit. He's still hidden on the depth chart as of right now. But then again, he's going up against Jason Peters, an all-pro, for how many years? They said he's working on his rush techniques. Obviously, he can bend the edge, but he does need to work on the inside rushes. And Jason Peters is just having fits with him. So those would be like the top 2 that you're looking at to start. Pumphrey has been doing things in special teams and stuff like that. But, I mean, they're coming along, but I'm excited to see him in Game 1 against the Packers tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to tomorrow, and, we'll get to see maybe 1 or 2 drives depending on how they look with the first-team offense. But hopefully we're able to see, first-team defense for, the majority of the first half. With Derek Barnett, I would expect him to come on more towards the end of the season. I really wouldn't expect him to blow the doors off. First few games.
And I
You know, I
think
think
part of that is just because of, they signed Chris Long. They still have Vinny Curry,
right.
Brandon Graham. So,
Yeah, there are guys in front of him, who will get the job done. And I really wouldn't be surprised to only see Derek Barnett playing on third down, at least in the first few games of the season, until he really gets his feet wet, or if Vinny Curry just drastically underperforms, and he's forced into that role. But I would expect him to just purely be a pass rusher in the first few games of the year.
early on, Shelton Gibson was kind of struggling as well. He came on, or at least in open practice, he made a couple of plays that I was surprised about. But Matt Collins, I'll tell you what, when we went down there, I was really surprised. He looks like the tallest person on the team, if it's not Lane Johnson. He looks as tall as Alshon Jeffrey. He's a little bit cut, and you can just tell why he is a special team. Like, no one was getting past him in special teams drills. And then he was easily gunning down the field when they were doing kick returns and punt returns. So those would be two more to look out for. I think Matt Collins, the other thing I really liked about him is he would catch the ball in traffic, and he would get bumped, but he really wouldn't move because of that big body. It seemed like every time he was catching the ball, from my vantage point, someone was right there to hit him, but he was hanging on. So maybe he can work his way in for a couple reps. I wouldn't expect much from Shelton Gibson, but we'll see where that goes as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tougher for him to make the team at this point, with the emergence of Marcus Johnson as well.
Yeah.
I really don't expect them to carry 6 receivers. I think it's going to be 5. But we'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, I think at this point he's more of a practice squad guy.
Let's talk about Carson Wentz. From what I could see and everything I read, he looks really sharp. Now, we just touched on the fact that the cornerbacks aren't that good, and maybe that could be alluding to the fact that he looks amazing. But I really like the fact that he came in this offseason. He knew he had to step up leadership-wise, and he's done that. But on top of that, he's got the playbook down. He is lining up his guys. Like he has command of the huddle. All those good things you want to see in year 2 of Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I touched on that early in the opening. I think that this year you really just want to see his progression and his growth, and I really do think that it's all about him this season. I think that if they're able to finish 9-7, 10-6, and maybe sneak into the playoffs, I think that's an added bonus. But I think realistically, what you want to see out of this season is growth from Carson Wentz, and really, be able to project him 3-4 years down the road, because obviously that's what you're going to be building towards. We know that they're not a Super Bowl contending team this season. And like I said, he's really what you're going to tune in for every Sunday to really see what he's doing out there. And everything that we've read and everything that we hear is, he looks great. His confidence is very high. He's taking care of his teammates. He's doing the right things. He's saying the right things. He's going about it the right way. So it's very promising to hear as an Eagles fan that, you have a young quarterback who the future looks bright for.
Other than the one underthrown ball that Jalen Mills picked off last Sunday at their open practice, kid was dropping more dimes than T.J. McConnell. It was pretty incredible. There was some that were right out of the fingertips of the defender, and J-Matt and Zach Ertz were both toe tapping the sideline. Ertz caught some in traffic, which was actually really good to see because he's had some issues. As soon as he gets popped, he'll either drop the ball or go straight down. But he made some really good catches. And Carson Wentz, what else can you say? He looks primed for a big season. I don't know about statistics. Like, I saw someone today on Twitter, he was saying that he's basically going to double his touchdowns. I thought that was a little too high, but he basically said, I forget who it was. It was some NFL reporter said that Carson Wentz was going to have 31 touchdowns this year, and I don't know about that, but
it's a high number.
Yeah, that's doubling. He had 16 last year, so
right.
We'll see. And again, it comes down to what you said. It's the situational football. If they're in the red zone at the goal line, they're giving it to Blunt. They're not going to be throwing the ball.
Well, we think.
Yeah. They could pull a Seattle Seahawks thing and not give it to Marshawn Lynch, but We'll see. As far as the division goes, we'll get into that a little later, and probably in the next few weeks we'll make some predictions and stuff like that. But Colin Cowherd actually had them at 10-6, the Cowboys at 10-6, the Giants at 8-8. He had the Eagles winning the division, which I thought was a little strange, especially for Colin Cowherd.
Yeah, I did catch that whole segment on his show. Um, I mean, it's really not unrealistic to think that they could win 10 games. It's not. Um, but I think for them to win 10 games, I think that Zeke Elliott is going to have to be suspended for a few games. I think that it's going to be very tough to compete against the Cowboys this season.
Did you
You
happen to
know,
see the report on Zeke from Adam Schefter today?
I saw that there wasn't yet a determination.
There was not a determination yet, but he said it is possible that Zeke Elliott gets up to 6 games. He said it's very unlikely, but the max would be 6 games for Elliott.
Well, yeah, I mean, if he's suspended for more than 2 games, it's gonna be a completely different Cowboys team. They're gonna put the ball in Dak's hands, and he's gonna have to sling it around. And I just don't think, I really think that there's gonna be, if that's the case, I think that really gonna be exposed this season. And not that he's not a talented quarterback, I do think he is, but I think that
He was so good last season, he's going to have to take a step back.
Exactly, and I think with any young quarterback, and that's Carson included, you're going to go through growing pains. You're not just going to take the league by storm. It doesn't happen. So I would think that if they miss Zeke for an extended period of time, they're going to be in a lot of trouble down there in Dallas.
And especially to start the season, you never know. They could go 0-2 in those 2 games that he's suspended, and then kind of spirals. Every week is very crucial, and to get off to a bad start, that could spiral your entire season. That's what we're hoping for. It may not happen, but let's move into one of the sadder storylines that we have. Darren Dutch Dalton passed at 55 years old, and it was a shame. He's the third person. You have Tub McGraw, and you also have Darren Dalton, who suffered from brain cancer. Now, I saw some reports they were trying to link it to Veterans Stadium. I don't know about that, but as far as Dutch Dalton goes, what can you say about the guy? He was a great leader. I had the chance to meet him at an autograph signing, and to be honest, he treated me like I was one of his cousins or nephews. Reached out his hand, very polite, humble, kind. I don't know what else you could say about him. It's a shame that the Phillies lost him.
Yeah, it's a really sad story. Especially for a guy to pass away at 55 years of age. I mean, that's very young. And to go through the battle that he did and still be able to hang on for a few more years, until ultimately, it ended up costing him his life. It's really unfortunate. Like, you don't want to hear that happen, especially to one of the heroes in our town. It's a tough pill to swallow. I think it was a very emotional day for big Phillies fans, and even you could hear from different sports writers and hosts on local shows how torn up they were, because he was still heavily involved. He was still coming around the area every year, doing charity events and coming to the ballpark, and he was all over this area. So I think that it's just one of those things where I hope that there's nothing tied back to Veterans Stadium. That'd be super unfortunate if that was to become a scandal or of some sort. But everything you hear about the guy is he was a true class act, and and that's something you can tip your cap off to.
Absolutely, well said. We're going to transition to a little bit of Phillies talk right now. Let's get the final results of the poll that we put up on Twitter at SportingEdge1. The top storyline of Eagles camp so far is 57% the lack of corners. We have 36% Wentz development, and only 7% goes to Matthews and Aguilar. I'm a little surprised. I thought that Wentz development or Aguilar would be the bigger question, just because we want to see the offense explode this season with the new people coming in.
I'm sorry, can you read the results back to me one more time?
Yeah, so we have 57% would be the lack of starting corners, and then Wentz's development is 36% right behind that. And then Aguilar and Matthews' battle for the slot position is only 7%. And I was just saying, it's kind of odd. Like, we brought in all these free agents on offense, and we want the offense to explode this season. But clearly, Eagles fans aren't fooled. They know that the cornerbacks, this team is going to have to put up 30 a game.
Right. There's going to be games where they're going to have to put up 28 to 30, 32 points to win. And I think that the offense is going to be capable of doing that. But I mean, that's asking a lot of your offense week in and week out to go out there and win games, especially with a second-year quarterback. And they want to protect him. They don't want him throwing nearly as much as he did last season. But at the end of the day, I mean, corner is the glaring hole, and every team knows it. I mean, they're going to go after our corners every single week. Doesn't matter who we're playing, they're going to try to air it out. That's our glaring weakness. So I mean, that's definitely the story to watch. I hope in like the next 2 years we're just not talking about cornerback trouble anymore, because I feel like we've been talking about it for like 6, 7, 8 years at this point.
Yeah, since Sheldon Lito left. All right, let's transition into the Phillies talk. There was a lot of talk today on the radio that the Phillies are or are not boring. Me personally, I have been sticking around with them since Nick Williams came up. And let's start right there with him. I like watching the development of the younger prospects, and I know you went out to Lehigh Valley, and we'll get to that in 1 second. But as far as Nick Williams goes, in his first 30 games, he's hitting 297, 35 hits, 8 doubles, 3 triples, 5 home runs, and 23 RBIs with 15 runs scored. What more can you say about the kid? He came up and he's proven that he's ready for the major leagues.
Yeah, he's playing really well right now, and I think that when you see that out of your young guy who was a big piece in that Cole Hamels trade, it makes you want to do cartwheels, because you want some of these guys to pan out. I mean, obviously we know the odds are that only a few will, but in seeing one of these guys up and in the majors and having the early success that he's having, it's awesome to see. We really need to start being able to pinpoint the guys that we're going to be able to build around going forward. With this rebuild, and baseball takes a lot longer than other sports to rebuild. So I mean, it's definitely exciting. It's something that you want to check the box score the next day if you're not able to catch the game. You want to see how certain young guys performed. But it's definitely it's exciting to see young guys performing at a high level, especially so quickly.
The one thing I really like about Williams is you can hit him anywhere from 2 all the way down to 7 or 8. It seems like almost every night they're switching him in the lineup to wherever they need him, and he's still delivering. I really like that about him. And let's just stick with the Phillies for right now. We're going to get our chance to see another major prospect that we have, because Andrew Knapp went down with a fractured right hand. That gives way for Jorge Alfaro to come up. And Cameron Rupp is going to stay the starter, but at least Alfaro will be mixed in on the off days for Rupp.
Yeah, that's very key. I think at this point you were hoping that Alfaro is able to seize that job and really be the everyday catcher next season. You want to see him get the at bats at the major league level as well. So I mean, it's unfortunate for Knapp who goes down with an injury, but it's actually good in a way that this kid's going to be able to get up there, get some games in, get some at bats in, and really learn how to become a major league player. Who again was another big part of that Cole Hamels deal, and shows a lot of promise. I believe he's one of the top 5 catching prospects in the league right now. So you definitely want to see growth there as well. They really need hitting, and that's really his claim to fame. I know he struggled a bit this year. He did start off hot, but he cooled off a little bit in AAA. But you definitely want to see growth all around the lineup. If you can get your young guys up, it's a good thing.
Joe, let's start the movement right now. And as Carlos Ruiz retires this season, why don't we bring him back and he can teach Alfaro how to catch these young guns? Because the pitching rotation is where they're struggling the most right now.
Yeah, their starting pitching is atrocious. Other than Aaron Nola. Aaron Nola's,
been on fire.
People really aren't, tuning into the Phillies, but Aaron Nola's having a hell of a season right now. He's got 9 straight starts of 2 runs or less allowed. That hasn't been done here, I think since Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee era. So that's huge right there. His ERA is just above 3. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's really talking about the Phillies, but Aaron Nola is really having a great season, and that's really what you need. I think at this point, you can kind of see Nola's pretty much cemented himself as a number 2 starter. I don't think he's an ace, but he's a very good pitcher. So that's one thing you can take away from this season as well with him. But I want to see more guys up here, and I think if they were able to bring Chooch back, which obviously Chooch loved it here, so I really don't see it being an issue of getting him involved in spring training, and I really do think that's something you'll see. I know they had Roy Halladay in this year's spring training, as like a coach for a few days, and I think that Chooch is really one of those guys that I could see him becoming, one of the coaches and actually really sticking with the team all year round, and then really giving him a job to do.
Man, it's funny we start talking about the Phillies and the ratings go like that. But hey, we'll keep talking about them. We are gonna wrap up with your trip to Lehigh. I know you got a pretty cool experience. You were given some tickets to go see the Iron Pigs, and there's 2 down there that I know you really want to talk about. Even 3 actually. Let's start with Scott Kingery. He had a diving play the other day that was reminiscent of Chase Utley. I know we tweeted it out. Maybe we'll retweet it after the show. But he went up and grabbed it, and I was like, wow, that looked just like Chase Utley. And then I think in the same game, J.P. Crawford had one in the hole. Now, Freddie Galvis, he deserves a gold glove this season, but it's good that the guy coming up behind him also flashes his leather all the time.
Right. At this point, J.P. Crawford, more of his strengths are pointed to his defensive ability. He's got a lot of range. He's really struggled at the plate this year. He's actually come on over the last 10 games or so. I think he's creeping up towards 270 over the last 10 games. He's getting his batting average, I believe, is up to close to 230. I think it was like 209 at one point last month. It was pretty bad. But he's slowly climbing back up after that report came out that people were saying he wasn't a top prospect anymore. Obviously he's taking that to heart, and you could tell, he did have a really good game the other night. I believe he had 2 hits. And then Kingery's catch was, that was the highlight of the game for me. And he actually also had a triple that game as well. And that was a pretty exciting play. But I will say that every time Hoskins was up to plate, every time Kingery was up, and even J.P. Crawford, they were making great, solid contact. And that's really something that I want to see.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't want to see a lot of swinging and missing anymore, because I feel like that's really what we've been plagued by over the last few seasons. But I will say that seeing Dylan Cousins in person and watching that big guy swing and miss is pretty frightening. He struck out a few times. And I saw today, I actually looked it up, he's actually struck out over 150 times this season.
That has Ryan Howard written all over it.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. He's batting 220, but he still has 27 home runs. So yeah, I mean, you definitely want to see him get to work on his plate discipline. But I mean, there are a few young guys down there who are performing pretty well. But I think you'll see Kingery up, and I think you'll see Hoskins up at some point. But I don't think you'll see J.P. Crawford up to like late September if he's even called up at all.
Well, I'll tell you right now, J.P. and Kingery is going to be a great duo up the middle, turn a ton of double plays in the future years. Rhys Hoskins, they're trying to rush him into left field now. What do you think? What do you make about that?
I think that's more of them just trying to get him in a different position because they have an injury right now. Aaron Altair is actually injured, so that I feel like that's they put him over there so that he can get some work, and so they could get him up to the majors and have
Quaker or
yeah, to get him up just so he gets his at bats in. I think that honestly I think he's your opening day first baseman next year. But I feel like just to get him up to the majors and really get his at-bats together is really why he's in left. Or even just to show some versatility. But I really do think it's coming down to the at-bats. And right now I think he's batting around 280. He's got 28 home runs. He's having a great season. So I expect to see him up in the next week or so. But yeah, I really think it's because of the outfield. You really only have 2 outfielders right now in Herrera and Nick Williams, and the other corner spot is kind of just day to day. So I would think that that's what they're trying to do and really get him up and get him out there so that he can get some at bats in.
Okay, I hope it's not the long-term answer, because when I saw the report, I'm thinking you have Mickey Moniak, you have Zach Randolph, you have all these, even Roman Quinn. We've talked about this before. You have a ton of outfield prospects. So when I saw that report, I was like, what are they doing? But right. I heard that Tommy Joseph is blocking them Personally, I'm not a fan of Joseph, so I don't know why he's necessarily blocking Hoskins, who all he does is hit.
Mm.
But we'll see. Hopefully they bring him up. Alfaro and him get to start along with Nick Williams and the rest of the young and up and coming Phillies.
Yeah, it's funny that you touched on Roman Quinn, who's been just injury riddled over the last few seasons, and he showed a lot of promise. I think they're really going to have to make a hard decision this year if they really want to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. I think it's going to be tough if he's not able to get back on the field before the end of the season for them.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up episode 48. Thank you all for joining us on Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and everything else that we're on. We appreciate it. And Joe, guess what? Next week, we are going to have a game to analyze. I can't wait for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Doing what we do best, breaking them down. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited.
And eventually we'll be making predictions, and we definitely have something in store for our 50th episode that we're going to probably unveil next week. Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can shut it down for this week. And again, thank you everyone for joining us and voting on Twitter and all that good jazz. Joe, take it away.
All right, guys. As always, had a great time hanging out. Give us some feedback. Let us know what we could do to make your experience with us better. We love doing this. I know we took a little over a month off. Got some summer vacation in there. We had some good times. But yeah, I mean, definitely stay involved with us. Shoot us a message or a comment. Call in. Talk to us. We want to talk to you guys. We want to make our show as interactive as possible. And we wouldn't, we're not doing this without you guys. So, as always, we'll see you next week. And thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to head over to mysportingedge.com for all the latest updates and articles. Check us out. Like Tyler said, you can see our show also on Periscope. We have our YouTube channel you can subscribe to our podcast. Am I forgetting anything? I don't think I'm forgetting anything.
Nah, man, you did pretty good for skipping a couple weeks.
But, all right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.